Hi everyone, I hope you're doing well. In today's video, I wanted to do a few things. First, just provide a general update on sort of how things are going regarding training, injury, and the like. And then also maybe shoot a longer video regarding just some things about like my injury history. Last time I posted a video, I mentioned how I may do a longer video on detailing some of my injury history and some of the things I've dealt with running in the past. People seem to be interested in that, so I think today I will talk a little bit about that. Maybe people find it interesting, maybe not. Maybe it'll just be a little bit of a therapy session for me either way. So, first, let's talk training. 2 weeks ago, I posted that I was experiencing some foot pain and had sort of paused my injury, paused my training for California International Marathon. And as that goes, the marathon's no longer going to happen. I'm not quite sure what's going on with my foot, so I did get an MRI this week on Tuesday. So I will hopefully have the results of that next week and hopefully get some of my great, smart doctor friends to interpret the results of that MRI and see what's going on here. And I'm not quite sure, it could be a few things. I think where my mind initially goes to is stress fracture or stress reaction, just sort of given the symptoms that I'm having, where the pain's located. But, there could be, I guess, a few things. And so I guess I'm just going to wait and see, what the results of that are. But I think, I'm still experiencing some pain, even though this happened a couple weeks ago, and just, not in a state to run. So even if I got the results and it didn't end up being a stress fracture, I think that I would not end up going out to run this race. And we'll just think of a plan B if it doesn't end up being something super serious. And in a couple weeks, the pain starts to go away. But as of now, yeah, pretty much putting an end to the 2025 season, deciding not to run CIM, which is super unfortunate. I had a good year of racing and training, and so for it to end it this way is, it kind of sucks. I was really hoping to end this year with a great race, and I think I was really geared up to do that. Probably in the best shape for sure, marathon shape at least of my life. Was having really good training block, hitting higher mileage than usual, which maybe something I'll talk about soon. Is like, what do I think maybe led to this injury? It's not really a doubt in my mind, and it's pretty obvious when we kind of look at some of the things I was doing right and some of the things that I was doing wrong. But yeah, I was ready to run fast. And so it's the fact that this injury occurred, I think less than 3 weeks or little over 3 weeks out from the race. Super unfortunate timing. And, sometimes I guess things like that just happen. But looking back, 2025 was great. I ran a 2:24 marathon at the Boston Marathon, placed top 100, accomplished one of my goals there. Did a That was really the biggest race of 2025. Other than that, I did, a couple 10K races, a couple just like relay races and things for fun like that. But overall, it was like a big year of training just because the race I had placed at the very end of the year, being in December. So really from, I think June until now is what has really just spent logging base miles and training pretty intensely, which I think was good for me. I think you need to go through periods as a runner where you're not competing and just focused on training. And I experimented with a lot of stuff, had a lot of fun running, and I think that was the biggest thing. And potentially, what led me to run maybe a little bit more than my body was ready for. I think that for the first time in a long time, I was super fit, pain free, injury free, and just enjoying the process of running a lot. And I think about that a lot when something like this injury pops up and I'm not able to, do the thing at the very end. You're not able to get to your goal race, which is ultimately what you're training for. This is why I kind of always stress, at least for myself and when I'm talking to other runners, like, you got to enjoy the process of training, because otherwise, if you're just somebody who's like, I just want to get to the race and, training kind of sucks, I just have to gut it out and I'm really not having fun from day to day. And then you get to the race and the race either goes bad or you don't, run well, or God forbid, don't finish or don't start. Then all that training it literally was kind of a waste. You really just put yourself through a lot of unneeded suffering. But for me, I've always enjoyed training, perhaps too much. And so, but on the other hand, I think just look back and I had so much fun training over the summer and the fall. I'm looking forward to this race and learning a lot about myself through training and just enjoying the day-to-day process of training in general. So I don't look I don't look back on any of that as quote unquote wasted time because I was having fun training and leading up to this race. And I still got stronger. I learned things about, my body, what it can handle, what it potentially is not ready for. And so it was, ultimately the injury stinks, but we're going to move on from it. And once I'm healed and out of this sort of dark period, dark hole that I'm in and kind of, getting mad at myself, then we'll learn to move on. The getting mad at yourself thing is another interesting thing I've tried to work through. And, I try to follow the sage advice of people like Gordo Byrne. People listening to this may be aware of him. Fit guy, just knows a lot about fitness, just super well known and super well respected in the endurance sports space. But I remember him saying one time that like, you can't see injuries as a failure. And oftentimes it's really easy to do that. And especially with me, when I get here shortly to my injury history, it's because ultimately, you caused your injury, right? I mean, I was running healthy for the past 2 years. I'd gone injury free because I was doing things smart. I was embracing cross training and I was, limiting in some way my mileage. And then, when you don't do that, when you get out of the pattern that's safe and you get hurt, well, yeah, that was your own doing. I hurt myself. There was no doubt about it. I'm not going to blame, like a pair of shoes that I ran in or other life circumstances. It's like, you push your body beyond a certain limit and this is what happened. So it's easy to really get mad at yourself. And I really have been for the past probably 2 weeks, just kicking myself in terms of, why didn't I just keep playing it safe? I was doing well. I was having fun. What was this like edge that I needed to push to try to, squeeze out this extra fitness? So I'm trying not to get mad at myself, but in a way you have to a little bit so you don't make the same mistakes again. Somebody said that's the definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome. Anyways, where to go now? I guess, why did this injury happen? Again, anybody looking in from the outside, and even myself now with a critical lens, a 2020 hindsight lens, and trying to be unbiased in terms of looking at my own training. I mean, I really just think that I tried to eke out that extra 10 to 20% that for the longest time I told myself I would be happy sacrificing. For the past few years, I've told myself I'm just going to do 80% of what I think I can. Let's see what fitness I can do, what kind of times I can run on 80% of the total workload that I think I can do. And I ran some really solid times doing that. I mean, I ran a 2:26 marathon in October, November of 2024. And then in Boston, I pushed a little bit beyond that. But up until then, I was able to get a lot of fitness running, say 80% of what I can, and then really supplementing a lot of that training with the bike. This time, again, I think just due to the amount of fun I was having with running, the fitness that I felt, the health that I felt, and the confidence, and a little bit, of that excitement, I was just willing to sort of go to 85 to 95% of, what I was able to do. And I think ultimately that's just the combination of higher volume experimenting and then starting to go a little bit faster in that final month before the marathon. I just think those things, came together for the perfect storm of whatever's going on with my foot right now didn't make it happy. So, next training block we'll reevaluate and kind of go back to just some of the previous training blocks and the previous training I was doing, maybe say before Indianapolis last year. I was talking to my wife and just saying, I think that was the training where, I was able to run fast, but I was also just able to feel high energy and pretty healthy throughout the entire block. I was probably running 70 miles a week and doing 3 to 4 days of biking per week, as opposed to this block where I was doing 5 days of running per week and biking 2, and then even integrating the occasional off day in there, but obviously just running a lot more. But what was different, I think, this block versus the last one is I just noticed a lot of residual fatigue, legs feeling achy, feeling moody a lot of the time. And those things are signs that, like, listen, you're probably doing too much. And being, an exercise scientist, a physiologist, you have to overreach a little bit in order to reach a new limit. And to be honest, for CIM, I did have pretty lofty goals. I was going after a 2:20 marathon, 4 minutes, 5 minutes faster than my current PR. And I ultimately think that lofty goal was one of the reasons why I decided we're gonna have to like push a little bit. And to run a 2:20 marathon, I'm gonna have to do what a 2:20 marathoner does. And what do 2:20 marathoners do? They run 90 miles per week. They don't do a lot of cross training. Forgetting that I'm not, you know, most runners, and all runners are different. And I really just have to sort of be honest with myself about this is the kind of training that I have to do at this stage of my life in order to stay healthy. And I'm probably still able to run fast. I don't think I can, I think I can run a 220 marathon on 70 miles per week with cross training. And for next year, that might be the goal because we're not going to get injured in 2026. And in order to do that, maybe we just have to be a little bit more conservative. I think that I would continue to gain fitness doing the training that I did at this time last year, just repeating it block after block after block. Those compound on each other and that fitness just builds. I don't necessarily think that I had to run more. I did run more, but I don't necessarily think I had to reach my goal. So we're going to reevaluate and do things better next time and be accountable to myself about the cross training. I think one of the things that I did last year was I went through this phase where I was really proud of the cross training that I was doing, kind of seeing myself as how fast can I run on as little mileage as possible? And that was kind of a cool thing to do. And it was fun. And I was, again, staying injury free and staying healthy. And then as things went on, I think after Boston, just getting really excited about like being a real runner again. And a lot of that stuff kind of just got lost. So I'm looking to maybe revert to some of my old ways that were, letting me train hard and feel healthy. And really, and honestly, another thing was like just having a lot of knock it out of the park workouts. That was another thing when I was talking about last year's Indianapolis training block with my wife. I was like, I think that every week or every 2 weeks when I was doing one of these, pretty cornerstone workouts, I just remember every workout that I would do would just be, I would finish and it would be great. Like I was hitting my splits usually faster than possible. I was ending them feeling good. And I was just like, I was knocking these workouts out of the park. I had some great workouts this training block preparing for CIM, but really nothing where I was like, man, I killed that workout. I'm in insane shape right now. It was more, a lot of it was, maybe not as motivated or not as like feeling fresh for a workout as I probably could. And again, I just think a result of a little bit more cumulative fatigue from trying to run more miles. All this is just to say, we tried some new things this training block. We tried to really push into the more rigorous running territory and it didn't work. And that's never to say I'm never going to try to run, 90-ish miles per week again. But maybe next time we do that, it's just going to be purely base stuff. Don't try to do it when you're also trying to lump on intensity to run a fast marathon. So learning some things, going to change some things next time. And, it leaves me excited for, trying things again next year. But obviously right now the focus is on healing and figuring out whatever is going on with my foot, hopefully with the help of a lot of experienced people who, to be frank, just to give a few shout outs, like I'm very, very grateful for. I think this circle that I have built on social media, on Substack, on X is just seriously incredible. I mean, a lot of the help that I get whenever I have an injury, and especially this time around, it's just crazy. I mean, to just use one example or a few examples, I mean, when I left the orthopedic sports medicine place here in Austin, Texas, where I went, which by the way, I've been there multiple times and always had great experiences. The doc that I encountered this time, I won't tell the entire story, but it was just, I mean, when I went in there, obviously I got an x-ray with the foot, and anybody who's familiar with the stress reaction, stress fracture, that x-ray is rarely, they're not going to show anything. So always request an MRI, but I got the x-ray, it was negative. Guy came in, touched my foot a few times, told me that I probably just irritated my MTP joint, that I'd be fine going out to run this marathon and that I should just run on it to comfort. Now, again, I don't know if I have a stress fracture or not. It could be, but looking back on that now, I mean, if this does end up being a stress fracture, and perhaps it is because I'm still kind of feeling some pain, I mean, this guy just kind of like told me to get out of leave his office and just go run until tolerance. And knowing runners, we have a pretty high pain tolerance. So I would probably, without, other advice or just taking his advice at face value, just gone home and ran on it for a couple weeks and probably actually fractured my foot. So shout out, first to Dr. Howard Lux. I mean, I called him immediately after I left the sports medicine office and told him, hey, this was my diagnosis. Here's what the guy told me. And he immediately was kind of just like, Brady, forgive me if I told the story in my first post, but these things are almost always a stress fracture and you really need to get an MRI. And I just wouldn't run on it until you get further evaluation. So just having somebody, in my phone like Howard, who I can just text, and within minutes he responded to me, gave me some advice, told me what to do, and then agreed, hey, if you get the results of your MRI, happy to take a look at it with you and see what's going on. I mean, that's just incredible to have that kind of knowledge and wisdom and experience, and someone like kind enough to just lend their help. So thanks so much to Dr. Howard for that. And another shout out, to Gordo. I'll mention him a few times again, but I also texted him, a couple weeks ago, and he was able to put me in touch with a good sports medicine doctor who agreed to sort of take a look at the MRI and give some advice. So it's just like I'm surrounded by a lot of people who have so much knowledge and so many connections in the space who are willing to help out. And so I really just appreciate, all of you if you're out there, as well as just the people like extending their gratitude, I guess, for the injury. I mean, it's not that serious. It's not like I lost a loved one or anything, but I appreciate the support and anybody who's texting me about the injury. Because it does suck, and athletes understand athletes, and nobody wants to go through this. And so when you see somebody else going through that, you want to reach out, and I hope that I would do the same for all of you. But enough with the sappiness. I just wanted to, point out that I have a lot of people who I'm thankful for, and who have a lot of knowledge and willingness to just kind of help out. So that's that. Sadly, to wrap up that CIM training saga with bad news rather than a PR, the race is a week from now. So, in about 5 days, I should be getting on an airplane to fly to Sacramento to gear up for a personal best. But instead, I'm sitting here evaluating things, and not the way I wanted it to go, but that's kind of the nature of the sport sometimes. And have learned a lot, have evaluated a lot, and, I'm just excited to get back to things, although it may be quite a while depending on what this injury is. But we'll get back eventually, and we'll have fun training and set some new goals. And I hope that you all will come back to follow along when I can actually deliver on some of my promises. So the road to 220 is not going to come to an end in 2026, or 2025 rather. Need to get my years right in 2025, but hopefully in 2026 we will make it happen. Okay, so let's see. Maybe I think I'll talk about now, go into some of my injury history. Maybe there's some value here, and it kind of in a way like leads to this situation today, because it's all connected. But it would really, I would say, a lot of my relevant injury history really just starts kind of about 2 years or 1 year post collegiately. So for those who are aware, for those who aren't aware, I guess, I ran Division I cross country track and field at Northern Kentucky University. Small school, Division I. We had a nice budget, allowed us to go run some fun races, but I wasn't an All-American superstar or anything like that. But I had a lot of fun training, a lot of fun running in college, student athlete. It's it's a pretty good life. It's fun. Before that, I did cross country and track and field in high school, and so even through high school and through my entire college career, I maybe had 1 or 2 injuries that forced me to take, I don't know, maybe a combined few weeks off at the most, I think. So the entire career, I was a very, very, very injury-free, pretty robust runner, despite being pretty high mileage. I mean, even in high school, my senior year, I was running 60 to 70 miles a week. In college, I probably averaged for those 4 years 80 to 100 miles per week. I mean, I ran a lot and I rarely got injured. And so then fast forward, post-collegiate, I started graduate school at the University of Florida, was still running, still competing just recreationally at this point, obviously. And we started running with a team Florida Track Club, group of runners there, all ages, kind of just a training group there, bunch of fast people, but people of all ages. And so that was kind of where I was post-collegiately, just training recreationally while doing graduate school. And ironically enough, in 2016, I believe, the team, we all had agreed we were going to go out and to run CIM. So that was actually going to be my first marathon in 2016, the California International Marathon. I had signed up for it. I wasn't ready to run a marathon at that point. I knew nothing about marathon running. I was like, 22 and running a lot of miles, but I wasn't prepared to run a marathon. It probably would have gone okay. I don't know what I would have run, but um, looking back on it now, I'm glad that I saved my marathoning career for when I had a lot of this knowledge. So we were signed up for CIM, and in October of 2016, I was out on a run and was at an intersection, and a car ran over my foot. So, and I say why this is ironic because both of the times in my life that I've been signed up for, I've had something wrong with my foot. And so that was just a freak accident. I didn't get hit by the car, but I was, crossing an intersection and a car was turning right. And so they swerved, right in front of me. And I, missed the car, but the car ran over my foot. And I think I broke a couple bones in my metatarsal. That was the left foot, completely separate. What I'm dealing with right now is my right foot. Broke a couple bones in my metatarsal, so needless to say, I did not end up running CIM. But that was the first, and funny being not even like a running related injury, just like a freak accident. Crazy to think about that now. It's like a matter of seconds can determine a lot of things, but broke my foot. And so that really was the first time in my life ever that I was forced to take. At that point, it was probably 6 to 8 weeks at least off of running. Never in my life had I think I've never taken more than 2 weeks off, just the 2 weeks after a season when you take off, in high school and college and stuff after the season. I'd never been injured, never been, taken more than 2 weeks off of running. So that injury, that was the first time that I like physically could not run for a few months. So I went through a really weird time, and that was almost a decade ago. It's hard to think about my mindset then, but I know, and if you're a runner, if you're an athlete, you'll also understand like my mindset was not good. Not being able to work out. I don't even think I didn't really even know how to cross train well at that point, or even what cross training was. So I wasn't like riding the bike like I am now. I just really wasn't doing anything. I think I was going to the gym, doing the sauna, and maybe doing some swimming when I was out of the boot. But mostly it was like I was into this just weird, whole new weird body because it was like, well, I can't run. Like I can't do anything. I can't exercise for like 6 to 8 weeks. And so during that time, one of the things that suffered really was, whatever, in addition to my mental health, but was the nutrition side of things. I think I got into this weird mindset of like, well, you're not running at all. So like nutrition kind of just went by the wayside. Not to say that I ate bad, it's to say that I just certainly was not like eating enough, because I'm like, I'm not exercising, I'm not doing anything. Just like, don't really need to focus on eating. As weird as that sounds, the, topic for a different episode perhaps, but I've always just had kind of a weird relationship with food as some runners and athletes do. Needless to say, I went through a weird period of eating during that time, and that led, I think, to just a lot of weakness. Wasn't focusing on strength training, wasn't focusing on nutrition, just was kind of in like this really dark period that I went through. But obviously, I came back from that, saw some great physical therapists at the University of Florida. They were right next to our building at the College of Health and Human Performance. So I was able to go there every day and do physical therapy and eventually get back into, a running shape to run again. And, I won't go through then every single injury from then, but I would say in the next 4 to 5 years after that, I had probably 3 to 4 separate stress fractures. And this would occur every time I would try to ramp up my running mileage. I would, get a stress fracture, take some time off, kind of try to build back and do it again. So obviously this was very frustrating. Had never dealt with bone stress injuries before as a runner. I was kind of just free to run as much as I wanted. And that was never something I even like really worried about. But since that foot injury, it really set off some sort of cascade. And I tie it back a lot into just, honestly not treating my body well with food and not nourishing it and not making sure I was doing strength training to sort of maintain bone density while I was forced to do non-weight bearing, non-impact activity. I think I did a number to my bone health during that time. And it was after I think the second second stress fracture, these were in, I forget, I had tibia, I think both sides maybe, and then one in my pelvis, I think. Those were like the three main ones that I was dealing with. After the third one, a doctor at University of Florida who I had continued to see, and man, the fact that they were at the University of Florida while I was there was just a godsend. Dr. Kevin Vincent, Dr. Heather Vincent, I mean, they run the running clinic at the UF Orthopedic Sports Med Institute down there. Dr. Vincent, Dr. Heather, they're just Heather Vincent and Kevin Vincent. They are just some of the most knowledgeable people about running. And the fact that I was able to see him every time I had an injury is crazy. I'd learned so much from him just about injury prevention and about running. Did gait analysis test. I mean, they're just awesome people and super, super smart, like some of the leading sports medicine doctors in this area. So if you're ever in Gainesville and want to go see them, I highly recommend it. Even fly out there if you have to see them if you're a runner dealing with something. So much knowledge there. But I was able to see, Dr. Kevin Vincent every single time. And after the second or third stress fracture, he was like, "Hey Brady, like let's do some tests. Let's do some blood work, see what's going on, vitamin D, calcium, hormones, things like that. But then let's also go and get you a DEXA scan. Let's get you a bone density scan to see what's going on. Because these are, happening way too often. I mean, one every year, one every two every year. Like that's way too much. I'm a 25-year-old male. What's going on? Why am I having all these stress fractures? Aside from the fact that like maybe I'm not moderating my running volume enough. So we did that, got a DEXA scan, I got a bone density scan. And, the results of that, they were kind of disappointing, I guess. Maybe that would be the right word, but they were also very informative in terms of indicating what could potentially go wrong. So, for my age and, being a male, so like a male, 25 years old, which I was at the time, had very, very low bone density just compared to, what the norms are for somebody my age and sex. And so that was very informative in terms of, hey, this is probably why this is happening. But it was also depressing in a way because I was like, well, yeah, there's a lot of data out there that are like basically bone density. You build it up into your 20s and mid 20s and it peaks and it just starts to drop. So if it's already low, like, man, what am I dealing with here? Like, am I ever going to be able to run healthy again at like the volume that I want to? That's kind of the mindset that I was in there because of the results of this scan, which, were kind of, really depressing when he was going over the results of it with me. Not, fatalistic in a way because everything's modifiable. You can do strength training, you can do a bunch of lateral stuff, you can stress bones, you can supplement, more protein, optimize your hormones. I think all of that stuff can help to maintain, and even if it's potentially, as low as mine was, build up some bone density. But it also confirmed a little bit of my fears in terms of that period of a couple of years where I was, not running and not really taking care of myself, that, I may have just really like dug myself into a little bit of a hole and something that I'm gonna have to like deal with always. Maybe not deal with, but at least be cognizant of and at least be aware of. So that was kind of the turning point in terms of having to evaluate, what am I gonna do now to avoid this so that I'm not getting injured all the time, so that I can run healthy and, just not have to take 6 to 8 weeks off every year due to some, bone stress injury. So a lot of clues there. And then moving forward from that, I still have had a couple bone stress related injuries since then. I think 2024, I had a stress reaction in my femur, and then I'm dealing with whatever this foot injury is now. I'm not quite sure if it's a stress fracture or not. But, I've dealt with a few other things since then. So this is never behind me, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. It's something that I'm going to have to constantly live with and be aware of. That, and it's really formed my whole, training philosophy that people who are watching my content now may be aware of in terms of the, running just 5 days a week and never running more than 3 days in a row and biking 2 to 3 days a week. That philosophy has arisen out of this kind of injury prevention because I did things in the past. I tried to say, well, let's just run 70 miles a week, but I was running 7 days a week, but I got injured doing that. So I reevaluated and thought, well, what if I run 5 days a week? I can maybe run more miles, the same amount of miles, 70, 80 miles a week, but only 5 days a week. Give yourself 2 days a week where you're not running. And that has worked for 2 years. That training philosophy has worked to keep me injury free. Since Houston Half Marathon 2024, after that I was injured, but since then that was my last injury. So it's been almost 2 years since I've had any sort of injury. Doing this philosophy. Initially, it was 4 days of running a week, 3 days of biking, and then I started running a little bit more, 5 days per week and 2 to 3 days of biking. And that kept me injury free, until I decided to again push the limits a little bit with mileage, and maybe I kind of reached the peak of where this structure is helping me. It helps me if I'm doing 5 days a week, 2 to 3 days of biking, and staying at 80 miles, 75 to 80 miles a week. But if you try to run more miles on 5 days a week, overloading the system, I think, a little bit in terms of the bone health there. But those 2 days off, where I'm biking during the week are, one of the key components. And again, what I think has kind of led to the injury-free aspect of it, because, I'm giving what I learned again, and, being like the scientist and, wanting to know like how to help myself prevent bone injuries. You begin to learn that, we think of bones as being these static, just, oh, it's a bone, it's a hard bone, and it's made of calcium and collagen, and it's just there. But in reality, they are as dynamic as our muscles are. When you run, when you exercise, you are breaking down the bone. And then when you're not running, when you're recovering, when you're eating, the bone formation cells, those are all going into overdrive, repairing the bone. So it's just this dynamic tissue, just like skeletal muscle. In the moment that I started to think about it like that, that's the moment that I sort of changed up my training philosophy and said, I got to give them more recovery time. So those 2 days off per week, I'm not running for 48 hours at a time. Give your body, obviously, but also then your bone tissue a chance to rest, regenerate, recover before you punish it again, with another run, because it is traumatic to the skeleton. And so changing my thinking about bone as being a dynamic tissue is one of the things that has kind of led to this training philosophy as well. And it's really, it's just interesting. We can learn so much about, we don't think of bones like that, but this whole kind of injury cascade has changed the way that I think about them. So anyway, kind of that's, formed the training structure. That's a little bit of my injury history, and just it's one of those other things where you try not to get like mad about yourself in terms of this whole like bone health type of thing, because it does seem like something that is, self-imposed. It's like, why did you put yourself in this situation? You could have just like taken care of yourself and not been weird about food and eating. And I mentioned that, and again, I think that's just like a can of worms that I don't want to open right now in terms of my history with like, body weight and things like that. It's something I think that a lot of runners and a lot of athletes struggle with, but few are very open about it. And I'm not hesitant to be open about it, I think, but it's a weird topic to talk about, maybe especially for a male. But at the root of, all these injuries is kind of that. I mean, there are like two components that go in, I think, to maybe three components that go into like bone stress injuries. It's, the training component, moderating your volume. There's the nutrition component. And then, there's like the biomechanics component. If you have poor running form, that can also enhance your injury risk. But the training has obviously played a huge part. But the nutrition thing, as informed as I'd like to be about nutrition, and as much as I write about research and nutrition and really know the smart things to do, a lot of the times as athletes, we don't put those things into practice. And it's really been a constant source of growth for me in terms of learning about nutrition and learning to fuel my body better and just eat better, not eat better in terms of healthier, but eat better to meet the demands of what I want my body to do. It's always, I think, been something that I've struggled with, unfortunately. So work in progress. We're all works in progress. It's what makes the sport fun, I think. Every time, every day is like a chance to implement something new or learn something new, or stop doing something stupid that you've been doing for a long time and start doing something smart. I thought, and I think it still was. A lot of times you can't out nutrition too much training or just too much load on your body. But if you are feeling right, I think it allows your body to do a lot. And I was feeling right this block, but I certainly could have done some things better, especially, running 90 miles a week and cycling a couple times on top of that. It's just like, I don't know how many, what my energy caloric burn is, and I loosely track my caloric intake, but you might be running in an energy deficit still. I mean, without really quantified information, I don't really know that, but it would be something interesting to learn. So maybe that's something that I kind of implement going forward to learn more about myself, because that's what this is all about, I think. You never just want to be locked in and say, this is it, this is all I'm willing to learn, this is all I'm willing to train, and I'm good with how it's going. I think I, constantly want to improve and do things better, especially if that means I'm going to be able to stay injury free, because ultimately, and I think I'll end with this, I got out of my philosophy in this training block where after my last injury, I told myself, you know what? Like, that's it. I'm done being injured. Even if that means I'm going to settle for 80 to 85% of what I think I'm capable of. I would rather be 85% of my potential and injury free versus pushing that 90, 95% and risking every year or so having to just take an extended period of time off. It's just not worth it to me at this point. Nobody's paying me to do this. Loosely, indirectly, I guess. Sometimes I feel like I am getting paid to do this. But running isn't my full-time job. I would just prefer to be able to do it all the time, because when I'm not doing it, I'm miserable. When I am doing it, I'm having the most fun ever. There's nothing that I love more than running and being able to train. Even if I wasn't able to race, I would train hard every single day just because it feels so good and it's fun. That's simply it. And the fact that I'm sacrificing a lot of fun and just putting myself into this mental state in injury, it's really, it, to be honest, is not worth it to me. And I don't like to say that like I'm gonna, settle for a certain amount of training. But at some point, you just got to be like, you know what? Do I want to do this for the rest of my life? Yes, or at least as long as I can. I like to be a kick-ass runner at 40, 50, 60. And if I want to do that, gotta stay healthy. And maybe that just means doing a little bit less than I think I'm capable of, and not falling into this trap of, everybody else is doing this. All the 220 guys are doing this type of training. It's like, you're not them. And I have to realize that. I have to realize that I'm my own runner. I need to do the type of training that fits with my physiology, with my history, my very unique history as a runner that no one else shares. I think I just need to realize that this is me. Let's not get caught up in the social medification of running. As much as I love sharing my stuff, I think sometimes I can force you to maybe like, oh, I'm gonna try to be a little bit more impressive on this run or this weekly mileage to share this out on social media. So I'm gonna be a little bit better about that. Not to say that I'm going to share any less, but just get back to like running for why I run, for me. Don't think about what everything's gonna look like. Just run and post things and continue to do informative, hopefully entertaining content and training data regarding running, and I think people will continue to enjoy it. Anyway, that being said, I appreciate everybody who tunes in to these videos and to my training log. It still amazes me that people will log on to see and to read about my training and hopefully learn something, because that is really why I post it. I mean, I'm not posting it for like, hey, everybody, look what I did. Look at, what a stud runner I am. I could really care less about that at this point. I mean, yeah, it's fun to post a PR and be proud of yourself. There's pride in the sport, like that's okay. People run for PRs and to be fast. But on the other hand, I think it's fun to share the data and the learning experiences, and if it's just a couple people who are like learning something, whether it's how to fuel a workout or a training run or how to recover right. I mean, it's worth it just to share that knowledge, and I really do have a lot of fun doing it. So hopefully you're learning something. Hopefully you're finding it entertaining. And maybe most of all, maybe you're learning what not to do. Maybe you're out there and looking at my training and then looking at this video of me right now saying, I don't want to be him. I don't want to be sitting in a chair and not running and with some unknown foot injury. Because neither do I. So I'm gonna try to rewatch this video in a few months and remind myself what my mental state was right now in order to prevent this same thing from happening in the future. So with that, I think I'll wrap up this video. Thanks again for watching. Thanks for tuning in for this, marathon training block. Maybe I'll continue to post weekly videos. I really like doing these, but obviously, I won't be posting anything regarding training in a while until I figure out what this foot injury is, but I will be sure to detail the comeback process whenever that happens. So stay tuned for that. And until then, we'll see you on Substack and wherever else we are interacting.